Many people say that they want to write a book, yet 9 out of every 10 people who start writing a book never finish it, leaving one of their biggest dreams unfulfilled. So, what is it about the 1 in 10 people who do finish writing their book? What do they have, and what drives them to complete their books, their plays, and their songs? Welcome to the Editor's Desk, where we explore their writing experiences, their motivations, and their struggles. And now, here are your hosts, author, writing coach, and self-publishing guide, Lynn Everard, and author, Louise Gomez. Afternoon from South Florida. Yes, I almost said sunny, but I caught myself. I'm not doing the weather anymore. You're watching The Editor's Desk, and my name is Lynn Everard.
Hi everybody, welcome to the show. My name is Louise Gomez.
So Louise, it's election time.
Yes, it is.
In our world. And I don't know about you, but I've been inundated with ads and text messages and all kinds of things. And all the politicians have something in common. They all have things they want us to believe.
Yes, this is true.
But as we're about to find out, that very often within one of those beliefs that they're selling us is a lie that they don't want us to detect.
You know, and sometimes people lie so much that they can even believe it themselves. Like, they've said it so many times that it can become a truth for them. So it's not that I'm excusing them, but their perception could be that it's true because they've twisted it in such a way, right?
Absolutely. So I think we should probably not keep people waiting any longer.
I know. We have a great guest, and I cannot wait to introduce her. Now, you invited Lisa because you know her from your Y coaching.
Lisa and I are both Y coaches.
That's right. That's right.
And then when I found out she was writing that book, I said, oh my gosh.
I know.
We have to have her on the show.
When you kept talking about this book, and every belief there's a lie, I said, I got to read that book. It sounds really good. So Lisa has over 20 years of experience as a transformational leader, award-winning speaker, and international best-selling author, expert in the field of human behavior, leadership, and personal development. She also trained in the winner's mindset with Bob Reese, the former head trainer for the New York Jets, and helped a professional golfer win Golfer of the Year. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, good, because we have lots of questions for you.
A lot.
It won't be a situation where you're on the witness stand, but it might feel like it every once in a while.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here, and just Lynn and I are both Y coaches, and that's how we met, and just the synchronicities of how this all happened is really amazing. So I thank you for having me here.
Yeah, well, when I found out you were going to be in South Florida,
Right.
then it was, okay, we get to work this out. And we did.
And yes. What was interesting in your book, you mentioned that one of your colleagues has a similar Y as yours. And what's funny is Lynn and I are both contribution, clarify, and simplify. Same thing, done independently of each other. So I thought that was interesting how you mentioned that you had a similar...
Right. Well, people of like minds, you know, appreciate each other. But it's also good to have complementary Ys as well.
Yes.
This is based on originally Simon Sinek's, you know, his TED Talk of wanting to know what your why is, and the importance of it. And then what happened was Gary Sanchez went and saw him speak and said, I want to know what my why is. And Simon said, I don't help people figure out their why. I tell them why it's important. And then Gary Sanchez went on to discover that there's actually 9 whys. So my why is challenge. And these are the people who think outside the box. They don't want to do anything like anyone else just for the sake of being different. And my partner, Kevin, is also challenge.
Wow.
But as you read about in my book, he owned his why. He was very comfortable with being different. I wasn't. because I thought that I was broken. As a young child in kindergarten, I was struggling with reading. I had minor learning disabilities that no one had detected. And everyone could read and write and do their numbers, and I couldn't. And it started just this whole progression of me going to summer school every summer and just thinking that I wasn't smart.
Right.
And that was my lie.
Yes.
And that was the underbelly of almost every single decision in my entire life, was the fact that I didn't think that I was smart. And so I gave my power away to every single person who I thought was smarter than me, which was just about everyone. And so I married my ex-husband young, and I just decided I was going to be the best mom I could be. And I was always envious of people who really felt passionate about what they were doing, because I just couldn't figure that out. I didn't know. And then I had a nervous breakdown. At the age of 38, I was suicidal. I didn't want to be here anymore, and went through this whole series of self-discovery and transformation. But it was interesting, because it wasn't until the why itself, when I found out that I was that challenge personality and I was different, and it made me realize I'm not broken. I just like being different, and that's my superpower, and that makes me unique. So the why has been really a huge part of my work, and it really shifted and helped change me. Now my partner, Kevin Martin, he totally owned being different. He loved it. He loved the attention of it, and so for him it worked.
My son is a challenge, right? You know, my son, I think he owns it too. He just loves to be different. And you know what? But now that you discovered what your why is, it's just like you said, it made it so much easier, right?
Absolutely. And then, and my how, because we have what they call the why operating system. So I'm challenged. How I do that is I help people find a better way. And what I bring is the ability to make sense out of complicated situations and problems. So I feel like I'm a detective. I'm a big problem solver. I love solving problems.
Yes. You know what I also loved in her book? I'm sorry, Lynn, I just realized I cut you off. I have to say this. You broke down the different forms of intelligence.
Yes.
That was so important to me, because I myself, you know, my brother went to Ivy League, you know, Harvard and this and that. So in my mind, I'm like, I'm not good in math and science. So I didn't consider myself I was just different than him, right? So, but once I realized I was more of the creative type.
Right.
So you broke all the different intelligences down, and I loved how you did that, because everybody has a different form of intelligence.
It's exactly. Dr. Howard Gardner, actually a professor from Harvard.
Okay.
He wrote a book about it, the 9 different types of intelligence. And what he talks about is that everyone has their own brilliance. And the problem with our conventional schools is that they only really teach to 2 or 3, reading, writing, arithmetic.
Right.
And then you have people the creatives who get left out. We end up, they drop a lot of those programs and music programs, and athletics are still pretty big, but there's so many different types of ways that we think and things that are make us special. And we also don't learn how to critically think in school as well. It's like we learn to come up with answers that the teacher would like.
Right.
Or what our parents would like.
Right.
And I see that now in school today, and it's really disheartening, because people, you wonder why so many people are depressed, because they don't feel comfortable being them.
Right. Oh, that makes sense.
You know, one of the things I loved about your book is that as I read it, I could see that you wrote it from your why, your how, and your what. Because the first thing is, what do we do with beliefs? Well, you're challenging them, right?
Right.
And you're challenging people to see that in the belief, there's also a lie.
Yes.
And if you're going to believe the belief, you're going to believe the lie as well, right? And then better way. So there must be a better way of explaining all of this. which is what you did in the book. And then finally, your result is to make sense. So it had to make sense for you, but if it made sense for you, it was more likely to make sense for the person who read it. And that's one of the things I've been so fascinated about is when I did Dawn and Freddie's Why, and then I watch them, right? You know, because I can't help but not, right? And then I see how they're being their why, how, and what. And then I'm like, damn, this stuff is really good.
It is really good, and it is telling, and it helps you get closer to people and helps you better understand them. Yeah. And it's interesting because the first chapter in my book is how I challenged myself to get out of a 29-year marriage. I was terrified to be alone, so what does a challenge do? A challenge goes out and walks 4 feet of broken glass, bends rebar and arrows from her throat, and walks 40 feet of red hot coals to get the courage to leave a 29-year marriage. And it didn't even dawn on me not to do that. But that's what challenge people do.
Apparently, because I don't know if I would be walking on that
I was going to say a lot of things would have dawned on me, and one of them would have not been walking under 40 feet of hot coals.
Well, I was terrified, and I have to say it was interesting because they told us on Sunday that we, in order to graduate the following Saturday, that we were going to have to walk 40 feet of red hot coals. So every night we were walking 7 to 10 feet. And and all week long I was going into these nervous breakdowns going, I'm going to die, I'm going to end up in the hospital, how is this possible? I don't understand. And I was really, really struggling. And when it was time for me to go, one of the people who in the class looked at me and he said, how much fire have you walked this week? And I said, well over 40 feet. He said, exactly, now go. And it was like, yes, I've already walked 40 feet, just not all at once, but I didn't have time to think about that. And I just walked, and it was my easiest walk all week. I felt like I floated across those coals. Do I ever want to do that again? Absolutely not.
No, but it's what's fascinating about it is I believe if you feel that you were able to do that, another challenge comes up, you're like, hey, I already walked over coals, I've done this, so it kind of elevates your belief in yourself.
That's
right?
exactly what happened, because when I got home, I had been so afraid. My ex and I had an amazing time together. We raised 2 beautiful children, but we had gone our own separate ways, and it was time, and I don't want to say anything disparaging about him, but it was this tremendous fear that I had of being alone. I met him when I was 19.
Wow.
So we married, I was 23.
Yeah.
I just thought, how could I ever do this? And I always knew the things that we're most afraid of are the things that we have to face. So I knew ultimately that I was going to have to be on my own. So I chose to move to Vermont on the side of the mountain in the middle of nowhere, really alone.
Vermont.
And it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I've never been this happy, other than, raising my children, and that part of my life was amazing. But to focus on me now and figure out who I am, I had to go inward. And but I still had that little bit of who am I, not thinking that I was smart enough. It was still bubbling under the surface.
I love that quote. She said, the things that we're most afraid of are the things that we should confront or something.
That we have to face.
We have to face. That's so true.
It's funny because
very true.
The extension of that is the things that we have to confront in our lives, and our ability to do that becomes the work we're here to do for others.
Yes.
Right?
Our greatest wounds are our greatest gifts.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you were a perfect example of that, Lynn. You were one of my heroes. So.
I know. She has 2 things in her book that, similar to our book, talking about triggers, and then you had another chapter talking about forgiveness. Those are 2 main topics that we also wrote about. And for me, I look at them both as triggers. The name of the chapter that we have is called Triggers Are Our Gifts.
Right.
because when we can face what is triggering us, and then you spoke into that, I said, wow, we're definitely on that same page.
We carry these belief systems, and from birth until about 19 or 20 years old, our brain frequencies are very different than they are as adults.
Yeah.
So we live in these very high frequencies. They're very deep, and if you think about what a newborn baby has to learn and
Sure.
children and absorb at an incredible level, but the belief systems of our parents, our school, our culture, if we live in the suburbs, if we live, where we live, all of these things impact our belief systems. And so we carry these deep within us and they run us. So if there's any trauma that
Yes.
comes in, anything that happens, all of those things run us. And what was really stunning for me was, even though I had been doing work for 20 years, every psychic I ever sat across from would say, "Where's your book?" I'm like, "What book? I'm not writing a book." Every single one. It was the first thing that would come out of their mouth. And I was like, oh, God, I got to give these people up. And I knew, though, deep down I had a book, but I didn't have the confidence to write it because I wasn't a good student. Who am I to write a book?
Yeah.
And I finally sat down and I said, enough of this procrastination, enough of putting it off. There's information that I have that I really need to put down. I don't know what I'm going to do with it once I get it down. So I made a list of all of my lies. I made a
Wow.
list of everything that I believed about myself that was negative. And I learned this technique called the emotional release method. And from this Renaissance man who's 94 years old now, he's got a ponytail and
Nice.
drives a Mercedes convertible, and he's the coolest guy. And he really taught me to release
Nice.
at a deeper level and then forgive myself. And there's a technique called the Ho'oponopono.
Yeah.
It's an ancient Hawaiian prayer. And I made a list of the people that I needed to forgive and myself. And I spent probably 3 months continually releasing, forgiving. And then all of a sudden, I found myself neutral on everything.
Nice.
I wasn't getting triggered anymore. And all of a sudden, the title of the book came to me. And then I started writing, and I couldn't stop.
Because you cleared the space.
I cleared the
Cleared the
space.
space.
It's like there's this highway,
Yeah.
and I had this destination, and I had all these boulders that I had put in the way. When I took those boulders out of the way, there was nothing stopping me. And, for those of you who believe in the law of attraction, all of a sudden, everything started showing up. Everything appeared in my life that I'd think about things and they would show up. It was miraculous. And I'm very ADD. I don't sit still for anything. And I would sit for 5 hours at a time and write. And then I'd go back and read the chapter and go, "Oh, who read that? Who wrote that?"
Nice. Nice.
Pretty good. And finally, I finished it. And I was, now what? And I got involved with a coach who helped me with the self-publishing and getting it out. And all of a sudden, all these speaking engagement happened, this radio show in Miami, it's South Florida, and all of these opportunities have shown up. So I've really discovered that the more you live in your truth, and everything will show up. The universe provides. I've just been a living example of it. If you had told me a year ago that I'd be here, I would have laughed you. I would have bet my house on it. I would have lost my house, honestly.
Well, if you would have told us a year ago that we'd be here
True.
at this time this year, we would have laughed too.
True enough.
Yeah,
So
True enough.
it's funny how things happen.
Isn't
right?
it?
it
Yes.
is.
Yeah. So I still have this huge list of questions, but one of the things that I really took away from this was when my son was growing up, my daughter too, going through sports, especially my son, playing competitive sports and doing all of that stuff. And what was crazy to me is that the fathers were trying to project their own unrealized dreams of sports success onto their sons. And it
Yeah.
creates this huge lie in them,
Yes.
right? And you talked about that really well in the
Yes,
book.
you did.
And I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add to that, but I just saw that as being
Sure.
something that we really need to address in our world.
I had grown up in a town where it was really more about education. So that was the culture that I grew up in. And then I moved to a town in New England. If you understand sports in New England, especially in Boston, it's insanity. I mean, you just don't. It's everything. And the town that I lived in, they used to win state championships in almost every. It was a small town. I don't know what was in the water, but it was everything was about sports. And I would watch these parents obsess.
Yes.
And there was a bullying incident that I witnessed where this boy was writhing around on the ground holding his knee. He was in terrible pain, and these kids were standing around him and they were kicking him and throwing grass at him. Now this is junior high. He's like 7th and 8th graders. An ambulance came and took this boy away.
Wow.
So I wrote down all the numbers of the coaches, of the kids who were doing this. And I went up to the coach and I said, I have the list. And they said, the list of what? I said, the list of the kids who did this. It was all coaches, kids, and star players.
Of course.
So what they said to me was, oh, you're just a mom. You don't know what you're talking about.
Oh boy.
They had no idea who they were talking to.
Mm-hmm.
I was bullied as a child, so that was a big trigger for me.
Oh yeah.
So out of my own wounding, I was going to protect that child.
Good for you.
And, excuse me, a long story short, I went on within the next year to start a whole nother football program. I
Wow.
didn't even want my son to play
Amazing.
football. But it was too important to me that these kids were going to be as safe as possible and be with coaches that were going to be role models
Absolutely.
and to teach them how to win but also to lose gracefully.
Yes, I can totally relate to that, Lisa. I have 3 boys. They all did sports. They
Yeah.
all did basketball, baseball, some did football. So I can relate to that story and knowing and seeing how some of the parents, some of the dads, we used to call it daddy ball because
Right.
it was like, they were coaching
Well,
so intensely.
I've watched parents get pulled off the field
Yes,
and banned from
definitely.
them. But it goes beyond that because then you have these children who think that they can't get approval from their parents unless
Yes.
they're star athletes. And then what happens? What
Right.
happens if they don't get a scholarship or they get a scholarship and they don't become professionals?
Right.
Or they get injured. Then they get to this place where they're devastated because they don't know who they are.
Right.
And I always say, sports are great. My daughter was a lacrosse goalie. She was a state champion. She was amazing. And then she looked at me and she said, I'm done. I don't want to play anymore. I did what I set out to do, and I want to go abroad. I don't want to play in college now. And I was like, really? All these years? No, but I let her
Sure.
drive it. And so
Sure.
when she said she didn't want to do it, it was fine by me.
That's great. She found her own identity.
found her
didn't-
own identity,
Yeah, she
yeah.
didn't have the pressure from you or anyone. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's terrific. Another item was sarcasm.
Ah, yes.
I used to love sarcasm, right? Where I grew up, everybody loved sarcasm.
Yeah.
But I've noticed in myself that I've really stopped doing it over the past several years, and I wasn't even aware that I'd stopped until I read about it in your book.
Yeah.
I said, wait a minute, I don't do that anymore. But because you explained, I think, that the mind doesn't understand the difference between sarcasm and just something that's stated as fact,
Right.
right?
So I've studied the unconscious mind for 20 years. And what people don't understand is why do they think people get freaked out from a nightmare or a movie
Right.
or the real thing? The subconscious mind cannot tell the difference.
Right.
So with sarcasm, especially in the Northeast where it's really prevalent, if someone says a joke and there's always an ounce of truth to it. And it goes right through people and people take it on. And what happens is it blocks intimacy. So when you're in a relationship with someone who's constantly sarcastic, you end up putting up this wall.
Right.
And what happens is sarcasm is really a way to protect you. The people will use it to protect themselves. So what they're doing is they're putting a stop sign up in one hand and then go in the other. And it creates this really interesting dynamic. And we lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for a couple of years where they don't understand sarcasm at all. They took you literally.
Wow.
And my ex-husband was very sarcastic, very funny man, but he would make jokes and people literally did not understand him at all. And it was very hard for him. It was very hard for him to be there. Yeah.
I would imagine so, right? I didn't realize they were like that in Pennsylvania. Okay, good to know. My son just moved there, so
Western Pennsylvania. Philly's, it depends on where.
Okay. Okay, gotcha.
Well, that's good. And then I think the last thing I wanted to ask was just about protection and sabotage in terms of lies that we tell ourselves.
Right.
Because I think we all have a tendency to do that as well.
Yeah.
Well, we develop these parts of us to protect ourselves.
Right.
Right? So if someone is abused as a child, this part will show up and say, oh, if I eat a lot, I can protect myself because I can create an armor and I won't be attractive to people, so then they won't want to be intimate with me. But at another level, then I want intimacy.
Right.
So this part thinks it's doing a good job, and it does it for a while, and then it gets to a point where people start to go, this isn't working for me anymore, but I'm on this hamster wheel doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And you can't solve a problem with the same belief system that created it. It's Albert Einstein. I love that line. So you have to break that cycle. And you have to address that saboteur, that part of us. What I do is I talk to that part. And I say, how'd you like a new job? Because that part actually doesn't even like doing it. They're often exhausted. Because they're fighting the soul from and keeping the soul from doing what it really wants to do. So I always found that that part really interesting. That works. And the saboteur is very powerful. Most people don't realize that our 6-year-old is running us. And if we have a wounded politician, guess who's running the country?
Oh, yeah.
Our 6-year-old. Their 6-year-old.
Yeah.
So we have very close to the end of our show. So I want to give you a minute or so to talk about what you have coming up that people might like to know about.
Thank you. The reason why I'm here in South Florida was I was invited to speak with an organization called Blue Talks, Business, Life, and the Universe. Corey Poirier, he did 3 TED Talks, and he was frustrated because you're very limited on the topics that they would allow you to do. So he created a competing day of talks. So I'm here in Miami. I'm going to be speaking on Saturday. And then I'm going to be at Columbia University on November 14th speaking there.
Nice.
So I'm still writing that talk.
Well, that's
You got this, Lisa. I know. I have 100% faith in you.
Yeah, and that's fabulous, and we need to wrap up now,
Oh,
but
yes.
wanted to let you know that next week's guest is Michael DeSanti. He
Oh,
is both
nice.
a children's author and an author of a book for men, and he'll be talking about his children's book.
Oh,
So
wow, that's
be
gonna be
sure
great.
to join us next week. And with
Definitely.
that, we will wish you all a pleasant week.
Thank you. We'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Even if you have never written a book, you are still an author. In fact, we all are. In every moment, each of us is writing our own unique story that we call our lives. Because many of us are, as in the lyrics of the Dan Hill song, Sometimes When We Touch, writers still trapped within our truth. If this is you, why not start writing your thoughts in a journal? It will help you get your truth on paper and could just be the start of your own book. And don't forget to join us here every week for the next edition of The Editor's Desk.